I would like to read on Senate Bill 1. Thank you, Mr. President and members. This is from Senator Menendez. Members, unfortunately, I have been unable to attend committee hearings or the Senate floor this week. As many of you know, my beautiful 14-month-old granddaughter, Adelisa, was diagnosed with COVID-19. Most of you have met her during the regular session, and I am sure you will share my sentiment that this child is joyous and full of laughter and love. Members, this morning we learned that additional members of my family, including myself, are now positive for COVID-19. For over a year, my family and I have followed all CDC protocols. We are all vaccinated. However, we contracted the virus because someone, due to no fault of their own, brought it into our home. This virus is dangerous, and we have to follow scientifically proven methods to slow the spread. Members, during both the first and second called special session on matters that are not all priorities of Texans, bills have been filed that will interfere with people's fundamental rights, from attacking transgender children and their parents to the healthcare choices of women. Members, we have to take a good look at ourselves and ask, what role are we playing in history? What precedent are we setting? The record is clear where my office and constituents stand today. We still have time to do the right thing. It is my hope that we will use this time to channel our focus into important matters at hand, matters that can save lives. We should be mandating masks and use scientifically proven methods to slow the spread of COVID-19. We must take action so that small children like Adelisa are protected from this virus. We should fix our grid. Members, we have gone through these bills time and time again. We know who this is hurting. Quite frankly, it is important to recognize the many injustices. I thank Senator Alvarado for taking the time to share my thoughts and my opposition to Senate Bill 1. Colleagues, that is from our esteemed senator from San Antonio, Senator Menendez. I would like to read a letter that I submitted to the Lieutenant Governor regarding my intent to filibuster this bill. This is addressed to the Honorable Dan Patrick, Lieutenant Governor, the state of Texas. Notice of intent to filibuster Senate Bill 1. Dear Governor Patrick, I write to notify you of my intent to filibuster Senate Bill 1 during the 87th second called session. As has been articulated repeatedly during previous consideration of this legislation in the 87th regular and first called special session, many of the provisions in Senate Bill 1 disproportionately affect seniors, racial and ethnic minorities, and persons with disabilities, and will result in the denial of the right to vote for eligible voters. The freedom to vote is fundamental for fulfilling the promise of our democracy. We should live up to the promise by removing deliberate barriers to voting rather than erecting new ones. It is my first and most important duty to advocate on behalf of the residents of Senate District 6 and as a member of the Texas legislature, for all citizens who will be impacted by this far-reaching voter suppression bill, including our seniors, persons with disability, Latinos, African Americans, and Asians. Senate Bill 1 chips away at their constitutional protected freedom to vote, and I will deploy every procedural tool at my disposal to fight for them. Sincerely, Carol Alvarado, State Senator, District 6. We know that there have been hours and hours of testimony on Senate Bill 1, and I will read some of that testimony. We have also invited the public to send their comments to us on how Senate Bill 1 will impact them. This is testimony from a lady named Lisa Reina Lowe. Good afternoon, Senator Alvarado. This is testimony that was received today. My name is Lisa Reina Lowe. I'm a proud Latina and disability and minority rights advocate speaking in opposition to Senate Bill 1 on behalf of my 21-year-old son. His dream is to take part in our democracy and vote in person. To be honest, he also loves the stickers. Who doesn't love those stickers? My son just had his 40th surgery for a variety of conditions. He's legally blind and has a multitude of disabilities and syndromes, including Gorlin syndrome, a skin cancer syndrome. The sun, unfortunately, is not his friend. He was wearing masks and gloves before it was cool or mandated. What he cannot do is stand outside for hours to vote. Matching signatures are also an issue. My son has, and I hope I don't chop this up, dysgraphia, a deficiency in the ability to write. His signature, although it's recognizable, is almost never the same. The many limitations set forth in this bill will be detrimental to Texans like my son. Reduced days and hours to vote, and especially doing away with the 24-hour to vote and weekend voting when it's safe for Texans like my son to be outside. Not to mention the closing of over 750 polling places in minority areas throughout Texas over the past 8 years, making it incredibly difficult for disabled Texans who require specialized transportation to make it to the polls on time. We're talking about the toughest of Texans who have overcome or are currently dealing with challenges. Many in this room are blessed enough not to have to think about. In the not so distant past, my Mexican American grandparents scrambled to pay a poll tax. And speaking of poll taxes, I want to thank a friend of mine who sent me a copy of his grandmother's poll tax. And we'll talk about that a little later. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going backwards. It's imperative that we have safe and accessible elections for all Texans, regardless of party, so that all Texans have a say in key decisions that impact our lives and our communities in a transparent process we can all trust. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Regards, Lisa Reyna Lowe. I hope she is listening and watching this. This is another, Senator Blanco, this is from El Paso, from a Miss Ana Gonzalez. Gonzalez with 2 Z's of El Paso. Unfortunately, we are spending a special session on legislation that will continue to disenfranchise and neglect people with disabilities, communities of color, people like me. Senate Bill 1 makes it harder to vote, period. Even worse, it makes it harder for low English proficiency voters to be assisted when voting. Throughout my entire life, I've helped people that don't speak English. Growing up, I helped my parents and grandparents. In my current work, I continue to help Spanish speakers access and participate in our political process. It is absolutely a priority to me that people have the same access to obtain services, to participate in our communities, to testify in this Capitol, and to participate in our political process. Regardless of the language they speak, you can imagine that also applies to someone's fundamental right to vote. According to census data, 35.5% of Texans speak a language other than English at home. Many of these Texans, including members of my own family, are U.S. citizens and eligible to vote. Under this bill, assistance helping voters who cannot read or understand their ballot now need to complete a new form and take a new oath under penalty of perjury. The changes proposed by this bill make it seem like those assisting voters with limited English proficiency will no longer be allowed to name candidates on a political party or even answer the voters' questions. Senate Bill 1 makes it harder for voters who speak a language other than English from receiving needed assistance when they vote, period. We urge you to defend and expand the rights of Texas voters and not make it harder for us. I respectfully ask you to oppose Senate Bill 1. Thank you for your time. And Ms. Gonzalez, Ms. Ana Gonzalez of El Paso, I hope you are watching. Your state senator, Cesar Blanco, is proudly standing here supporting these efforts. He is present, accounted for, and listening to your testimony. I'd like to move on to another witness. This is from a Miss Jennifer Batson. Greetings, Chair Hughes. and the Senate State Affairs Committee members. Thank you for your time and this opportunity. My name is Jennifer Batson. I am here representing myself. I'm here to oppose Senate Bill 1. I am 54 years old. 2 years ago, I was diagnosed with cancer, and the resulting treatment left me with a below average white blood cell count, fatigue, and other physical symptoms. I have always felt it is my civic duty to vote, and I stood in line to vote in person during a pandemic because I was afraid of the consequences of using a mail ballot when I did not meet the age requirement and I was not disabled. I believe there are many people in similar circumstances to mine who would benefit from mail-in ballots, whether or not there's a pandemic. The Texas government should be in the business of helping citizens be actively engaged in their democracy, not restricting access to the voting booth. Other states have demonstrated that broad access to mail ballots can be an integral part of free, fair, and secure elections. In addition, the proposed changes to the role of partisan poll watchers, it's deeply troubling. I trust nonpartisan election officials. Partisan individuals and polling locations can easily lead to intimidation, disruption, and interference. This is the antithesis of providing free, fair, and secure elections. I urge you to expand mail-in voting so that citizens like myself can believe they too have a voice in their government and keep voting sites nonpartisan. Please vote no on Senate Bill 1. Next, I'd like to share testimony from Luis. There are so many problems with Senate Bill 1, but I want to draw attention to one provision, the voter roll purge. Section 1.03 of the bill sets up a flawed system for DPS to share data with the Texas Secretary of State in order to find and remove non-citizens on the state's voter rolls. The Secretary of State tried to do the same thing in 2019. I think we all remember that. And I remember at the time thinking about my father. My father came to Texas in the late 1980s from Mexico to practice medicine and raise a family. He became a naturalized citizen, and a few decades later, he taught me valuable lessons: to work hard, to serve others, and to be grateful to live in the United States and in Texas. After the 2016 election, when I was worried about the future of our nation, he told me, "You have to have faith. This is still the best country on earth, and I moved here to make sure you were raised here." During the 2019 attempted voter roll purge, the Secretary of State's actions were so careless that it quickly became clear that they had mistakenly flagged tens of thousands of immigrants, naturalized citizens, as non-citizens. If it weren't for federal lawsuits and a settlement agreement, those naturalized citizens would have been struck from county voter registration list. During those few months, I had no idea if my father would have his sacred right to vote taken away from him. I was furious that the hardest working man I know, a doctor, an immigrant, an American citizen, was vulnerable to being disenfranchised. He spent decades caring for sick Texans, and Texans couldn't care to protect his right to vote. My father was spared in 2019, but make no mistake, Senate Bill 1 is a step backward to 2019's failed voter roll purge. It perpetrates a false narrative that large numbers of immigrants are trying to unlawfully vote. And if it passed, Texans, Americans like my father, would be stripped of their right to vote because of some bureaucratic mistake. Like my father taught me, I still have the faith in this country and in Texas. Please do the right thing and vote no on Senate Bill 1. Luis. And Luis, if you're listening out there, I am so glad you and your father maintain that faith in our country and in Texas. I'd like to read testimony from Elizabeth Townsend, Powered by the People. She's from Katy, Texas. Good old Katy, Texas. My name is Elizabeth Townsend, and I'm here to speak about Senate Bill 1 and how it directly affects me, my family, and many others. My mother is 74 and is disabled, partially blind, and has mobility issues. She has voted in every single election since 1968. She almost didn't vote this last election if it wasn't for curbside voting. The provisions of this bill will make it painful to near impossible for her and for many others in her situation to have access to the polls again in the state of Texas. She instilled in me a sense of patriotism and duty and taught me there is nothing more sacred than the cornerstone of democracy than our right to vote. The right of access to the ballot is a fundamental right. The sponsors of this bill seek to disenfranchise their own constituents, many of which voted for them in the last election. This is not a Democrat or Republican issue anymore. It's a human rights issue. Under the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was proclaimed by the United Nations General Assembly in 1948, Article 21 states, the right to democracy. Everyone has the right to take part in the government of this country, directly or through freely chosen representatives. Everyone has the right to equal access to public service in this country. The will of the people shall be the basis of authority of government. This will shall be expressed in periodic and genuine elections, which shall be by universal and equal suffrage, and shall held by secret vote or by equivalent voting, free voting procedure. Senate Bill 1 is hardly allowing universal access to those qualified voters. This vote suppresses them. It makes sure there are physical barriers the disabled cannot possibly overcome to be able to access the polls. Senate Bill 1 further silences an entire group of people who have a right to access fair and free elections, just as any other qualified American. Why seek to purposely keep the disabled and mobility challenged Texans from the only options viable to them to exercise their civic duty? It is cruel. It is heartbreaking. I know for my mother it is. Whether through writers and sponsors realize it or not, this bill inflicts an injustice on an already marginalized group of people, including a large number of veterans that literally put their lives on the line to defend the very Constitution that guarantees our unalienable rights bestowed by our Creator. It seems rather than making it more difficult for these communities to vote, that priority would be to figure a solution that effectively, safely, and securely allows access to these communities, especially considering that nearly 7 million people did not vote in the last election. That's because Texas is one of the hardest, if not the most difficult states to vote in as it is. Solutions with the people's best interest is not offered in this bill. I urge you to not vote for this bill for these reasons. Until we prioritize the solutions to the problems this legislation creates, we cannot cruelly continue to deny and discourage qualified Texans from their right to use their voice at the polls. Thank you for your time and consideration of my statement. That was from Elizabeth Townsend in Katy. I'd like to share a testimony from Tanny Martin from Austin, possibly one of your constituents, Senator Eckhart. I am an elderly retired nurse with multiple chronic illnesses that will likely qualify for mail-in voting, but my illness affects my memory, Pointless extra steps in that process put me at risk for a mistake. I am new to Texas and don't know anyone here to help. I have social anxiety and chronic pain. Standing in line to vote for any length of time will exasperate my chronic pain. But the bigger barrier is the idea that poll watchers will have free movement in the polling place in the current political and social climates in Texas, even in my new city of Austin. I am very afraid of suspicious, aggressive, angry individuals who will intimidate and target voters. Of course, none of this is necessary. Senate Bill 1 is not a benefit for voters. It is a barrier to voting. I appreciate all the DIM members have done to protect us. Sincerely, Tanny Martin, Austin. Next, I have some testimony from Amy Litzinger. She says, "Good afternoon, Chair Hughes and committee. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Amy Litzinger. I am speaking against 581 on behalf of myself and Texas Parent to Parent, a statewide nonprofit organization serving families of children with disabilities and special healthcare needs. I would like to comment about the bill's impact on people with disabilities. Inconsistent signatures. I have a quadriplegic cerebral palsy. My signature is inconsistent and can be disputed as not my own. The bill says that I will need to appear in order to validate my mail ballot. If someone has to vote by mail because they are homebound, how could they go in? Can't they just say on the phone that they remember signing the outside flap? I could send in 5 more that wouldn't match either. The way this reads is voter suppression because it does not accommodate for my disability. The oath that helpers must take, the oath says that they are helping because the person can't write or see, yet I can see and write, and that isn't why my helpers are there. So my helpers would jeopardize themselves by taking the oath as it is written. I need assistance with tasks such as stuffing the ballot into the slot, opening the envelope, placing a pen into my hand, holding the paper down so I don't have to put Scotch tape onto the ballot, restuffing it into the envelope, keeping curbside materials on my lap as I vote while tied down in the ramped van. All of these things are not included in the oath that people will have to sign. We need for the oath to be less narrow, to be less prescriptive, please. Obtaining rides, it is essentially problematic for a Capital Metro paratransit service driver who brings more than 3 people over the course of the election, or if the person that I hire works far more than one person with a disability, and we all choose to go vote. It's the cumulative numbers of people using a ramped vehicle that make this language problematic. and is especially embarrassing if someone has to turn down friends or church members who need a ramped ride. It is, in fact, voter suppression. Voting curbside. If I choose to vote curbside and everyone but me must exit the vehicle, who's going to hold my materials? Please don't tell me it's going to be a watcher. They don't know my needs, and I don't want them to see how I vote. The Texas legislature has said multiple times in the past few months that the intention is not to suppress the vote of people with disabilities. And as I have explained, there are problems for a person with a disability with using any of the three options. I vote in every election and have the right to continue doing so. But unfortunately, this proposed legislation will prevent my voice and my vote from being counted. Thank you for your time. May I answer any questions? And this, again, is from Amy Litzinger from Austin. I turn now to testimony from Nicholas Hammer. Hi, my name is Nicholas Hammer, and I am a resident of Bexar County. I am here to represent Texas Organizing Project. Some of us know it as TOP. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. I'm here to speak against Senate Bill 1, specifically on the restrictions on mailing vote by mail ballots to those who are eligible. My mother suffers from a disability and needs to vote by mail to cast her ballot safely and easily. My mother does not have a printer and cannot easily print off an application to submit her vote by mail application. Like many other older Texans, she also has trouble accessing the internet. Bexar County has previously mailed her application directly to the House. That has been a tremendous help for my mother. Banning elected official offices from sending absentee applications and ballots to eligible voters is completely unjust. This has real life...
Whitmire, for what reason?
Will the senator yield?
Senator Alvarado?
I will yield for questions, absolutely.
Senator Whitmire?
If it won't take you off the floor. Supposed to say, if it won't take me off the floor.
Yes, I will yield for questions as long as that will not remove me from the floor.
No, it won't. And go ahead, Senator Whitmire.
Senator Alvarado, I want to engage you a moment on some of my concerns, and I know we share concerns. On the issue of the poll watchers, you and I, you've been elected official for probably about the time we met in 92. You run for precinct judge. So I guess you're familiar, are you not, with the practice of having poll watchers in our precincts?
That is correct. And you and I did meet in 1992, and
we were in some very competitive races where poll watchers played a vital role in watching the operation of the poll, the campaign workers, the candidates. Have you ever, in running, I think in 92 for a precinct judge, worked in numerous other people's campaigns, but you ran for city council successfully, state representative, successfully ran for the Senate. Has the issue of poll watchers ever played a role, good or bad, in any election that you can recall?
Dean Whitmire, thank you. You and I have been involved in so many campaigns, and I think almost we were always on the same side, so that's a good place.
Yeah, let's make that part of the record too.
We'll make sure it gets into the
Always
record.
been for each other.
For each other, and I'm sure...
Supporting the likes of Gene Green.
Yeah, and I'm sure that will continue in the future, maybe the very near future. So, yes, and I've said this before, when I was a precinct chair running the elections...
Oh, you were a precinct chair?
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you had a poll watcher, it was because the other side didn't trust something.
Yeah.
And
But probably it's often the precinct judge, election official, is pretty obvious to the world sometimes they support, certainly in the fall. Let's talk about the fall. You're a Democratic and or a Republican poll worker or precinct judge. Other political party is concerned about you holding the election, so they put a watcher in there to kind of watch the process inside the poll. Their purpose is to be the eyes of normally even the other political party. So they sit there, they make notes, they can ask questions, but you imagine if they have the ability to go and listen and engage the voter with the precinct judge, and they're from a different party or different candidates from who you're supporting. I mean, you've been in enough campaigns, the emotions are high, partisanship plays a role in the fall. And even in the primary, there's very hotly contested races. Do you share my concern that this is one of the most greatest exposure to the harm that this Senate Bill 1 is going to present to the election process?
I wholeheartedly agree with you, Dean Whitmire. And when I was involved in campaigns, nobody wanted to be a poll watcher because you couldn't move around. It wasn't as much fun as being outside pushing cards. You sat down and you did not move or speak unless you raised your hand and got permission from the judge.
Because the current rules are, we don't want you to intimidate or play a role in how that voter is going to access the election process. In other words, we don't want a poll watcher to become a player or an operator while a voter comes in who might ask for assistance. And voting, as you well know, is a very private matter to most people. So if I'm a voter with some particular need for assistance, maybe a senior, could be an eyesight issue, it could be a language issue, and you ask the precinct judge for assistance, my concern is under this proposal, the poll watcher can get up and listen to that conversation, which could lead to physical confrontations, certainly a disturbance at the poll. I just can't for the life of me understand why the proponents of this bill do not share our concern. It should be a concern of both parties, because as I cited when I was speaking against the bill about an hour ago, I already know there's going to be some very hotly contested Republican primaries There you go. You're going to have a poll watcher in there that can get involved in the discussion. It could disrupt the entire precinct election. From your experience, can you see the potential for that happening?
Absolutely. It's already a stressful situation when an election judge or precinct chair gets a poll watcher. And with these new provisions, it's going to invite to some a very intimidating situation. One of the testimonials that I read from a witness talked about that they don't want a poll watcher who they don't know to be in their space.
Do you see anything wrong with the current rules? I mean, did you see that was something that needed fixing based on your experience as a candidate, a precinct judge?
No, sir. I think the words conveniently close are sufficient.
Okay. Well, as you speak tonight,
I can. Good evening. Good deal. Sounds good. Yep. And will she go over with you, or can you go over? Will she go over with me, or will you go over like the possible, like the general format? Like we'll go X minutes, take a break. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Keith. Hey, good evening. Yes, I am. Good evening. My pleasure.
oh, did that originate with you, Donna Campbell? You know what? You better be careful. Tomorrow you'll be a senator sitting right over there. You know, you won't always be up there presiding.